District babies are the best babies.
The district? The Central?
Can we talk about the South End got the most culture?
And how we came up with the gigs dance?
But West Seattle really got the gigger team.
This is Seattle from the inside out.
From the inside out.
What's good, Seattle? Welcome to our second official episode of Youth Insider Podcast from the Inside Out, sponsored by Southeast Network. Today we will be discussing PTSD and trauma and how it affects us in our community. But before we get into that, we have a special guest today, with us today, Ms. Ricole. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
That's good.
Yeah, so before we unpack PTSD and trauma and what it means to our community and what it does to our community, we're going to get into one of our segments, Youth Speaks. Youth Speaks is one of our segments where we take anecdotes and questions from the youth outside of the Youth Insider Podcast, and we pretty much just address what you guys have to say and some of the questions that you have. So the first anecdote today is from Trey, High Point. He's from West Seattle, Fofo, you know. So Trey says, living with PTSD for me is crazy. When I be hearing certain stuff, it be changing my whole mood. I can go from chilling and laughing, then I hear something similar to a gunshot or a boom, and I'm ready to box, or I'm ready to break and get further. I even see certain things out of the corner of my eyes, and that puts me in a fight or flight mode. Moral of the story is PTSD and events make me more cautious and aware of my environment. You feel me? So this next one is from Asiana, straight out of South Seattle, Rainer Avenue, out of the Othello neighborhood. So her question is, when in a post-traumatic state, how do you cope with it? And then whether it be taking breaths or other techniques. You guys have any suggestions for Asiana?
I feel like some people, they just think of other things and try to get their mind off of it. It's kind of hard for me to speak on other people's behalf to actually deal with it because I haven't been through what they've been through. But I don't know for a fact, but I just heard some people say that trying to keep your mind off of it. But you can't really always help that because there's some triggers that trigger you in getting in that feeling. So it is kind of hard. But people that have dealt with it, how did you guys deal with it? If anybody.
I could share. So for me, I feel like freshly when I was 15, I had gotten shot as an innocent bystander. But freshly from that, I was in like a car. So like that's when it happened. And then like whenever I go on drives, like I would always like close my eyes, whether it's like near the place where it happened, because I didn't want to like reminisce or like just have a flashback of when it all happened. But I would say like some advice would be to let yourself process and let yourself go through it. Like just fully just let yourself process it, as in like recognizing that it happened, not trying to like, you know, act like, you know, it didn't. So like I went to a Christian like therapist, and she actually did timeline healing with me, where she pretty much did a walkthrough of that whole day of when my traumatic incident happened. And I found that like super helpful, because not only did she, you know, believe in my God, same God as me, like I feel like she helped me get over it in realistic, you know, the real life matter. I feel like she helped me really like process everything. And like I was able, like after I went to like 2-3 sessions with her, I would pretty much give a rundown of everything that happened, to like when I hopped in the car, when I, you know, everything that went down that day. I just talked to her about it and just like started talking about it. And then I started like utilizing my community like connections, and like I was in circles to where those were helpful. I was kind of a little bit pressured to talk about my experience, but I feel like that was good for me because I was able to like heal from it and fully like thoroughly heal from it. Just talking about it in the circle and just sharing it with everybody else who probably wasn't comfortable with sharing it at that time. So I feel like really letting yourself heal from it, talk about it, so you're comfortable with talking about it later and actually just sharing like a testimony with everybody. Because I know for a fact, not everybody is, blessed enough to get grazed rather than actually getting a bullet inserted into your rib cage or, anywhere near those detrimental parts of your body. Luckily I was grazed, and, all grace to God that I was grazed and not, impacted by those bullets. But mostly my arm was just impacted and I quickly bounced back from it. So I would say let yourself heal from it.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. For my trip, from my experience, I was actually fresh. I wasn't even 14. Nah, I was 14. I was just turning 15 next month, so I was 14. For me, I didn't really know how to cope. It wasn't really like, I don't know. It was like a life or death situation. My family was really scared for me. So really, like for me, I just wanted better for myself. Like I was like, okay, like you could go this way, you could go that way, and it was just like a mature moment for me, like making it through, and like I don't really know how I ever really coped with it, like ever, but I just knew like I wanted better for myself, and then like I never really felt comfortable talking about it because I was so young, and like people were so quick to judge and label. They'd be like, "Oh, he's a gang member," or "He's a bad kid." So like it was never nothing to talk about. Like people would be like, "What happened to your arm?" I'd be like, "I failed." Like so, it was just like it was weird for me, like. And then like how it affected me, like in high school, like I tried to play football my freshman year, and my arm, like, so I got stabbed in August. Football season like starts in August, so I was already going from springtime all the way through the summer, and then that happened. But I got selected to play for like a 17-year-old team as a 14-year-old, so I was like getting ready to do big things, and then that happened. And then it just like kind of set me back, but it really humbled me though, like, I could have not even made it. So it was just like really humbling. And yeah, I tried to play football that year. My arm opened back up, so I had to sit out. But I got to play basketball, and like I had a lot of great experiences, met a lot of great people, built a lot of good relationships. But yeah.
I would say I definitely feel you on like, having your life going in a certain way, and then like some just unexpected just happens. Like I was supposed to be going on a trip to like a physician's conference, and like still like freshly when I got out of surgery, I was still trying to go. And then my doctor was like, I don't think you should be like traveling with all this pain. And I was like, I still want to go, like put a lot of money, there's like over a band put into this trip. And I was like, I'm not about to be wasting my parents' money on this.
Right.
And so like I was trying to go, like, but then my mom wasn't trying to go because she had, stuff to handle here. So I couldn't go to Boston. I was supposed to go to Boston. And then I was just thinking, I was like, everything, happens for a reason. But like, yeah, I just feel like it's unfortunate to like have your stuff planned out, lined up, and then like something just happens and throws the whole thing off.
Sorry guys, I just hearing that you guys had to go through that, like really hard, because I never had to go through anything like that, and knowing that you guys were young and had to go through stuff like that, it's like hard to hear, but for you, like when you didn't have like anybody to talk to, or resources like counseling, even if that Miracle said it helped her a little bit, like when you didn't have that, like how did you have to deal with certain things?
honestly, like if I see either raw and uncut truth, like not like talking to like counseling or nothing like that, because I eventually did later on though. But like through that time, I was really young. Just turned 15, just went into high school. So like it was just me going through a lot young, like that, like learn lessons. Cause like I went through a lot of crazy stuff. Like even after that, like I was just not necessarily getting into stuff, but just going through stuff and like situations happening. You don't know how to handle certain situations until you've been in them. So that was really just like how I went about it. But like I eventually started talking about it like later on, like when I was like 16 and 17.
And knowing that it happened in your guys' like neighborhoods and stuff, how do you guys feel like still having to be around it and being around it? Like, how does it affect you now, and how do you deal with it?
I honestly learned how to just, I don't want to say like I'm immune to it, but like, yeah, I recognize it as a problem. But then also I think about it in a way that PTSD is pretty much like, you don't know who has it. Everybody's walking around and they could not know that they have it. So it's like this invisible, like, you know, disability that people have. And I feel like it's important for us to like educate our community about it, because it shows up, you know, in the criminal justice system. Like reasons why people are getting into all this is because they have PTSD. They're defending themselves because they have this trauma inside. So they're walking around with, you know, protection, trying to protect themselves. And I feel like just the system not knowing about this health problem, this health disparity in our community, it's a problem because we're being charged as criminals when really we should be charged as patients. Like I feel like just the lack of just awareness around PTSD is detrimental to our community.
So seeing these happen to young kids and just like say parents or just an adult in the community, how do you feel about this happening to young kids, and how do you feel about how the police treat their parents and then when stuff like this happens?
Loaded question. So let me first say that I appreciate you all being willing to share. I think it is important that our community has a clear understanding of these types of incidents and their impacts, right? One thing that I want to point out is Franco referenced not wanting to disclose what happened to you because other people, oh, he's a gang member. He had to have been involved, right? Because that's our society's approach, that there must have been something that he did wrong. That's the reason why he ended up being a victim. You couldn't have just been walking to school, right? And it's unfortunate because that level of criminalization of a victim is something that has become so near and dear to us that you then have to be the 15-year-old that is walking around in need of some level of counseling or, you know, mental health care. And then I also think that there are challenges around our community's view of mental health counseling, right? To hear that you got some level of counseling and support is huge, because typically in our communities we're taught that we're not allowed to feel, right? And so it's really, it's disheartening to hear the hurt, but I am encouraged to see you sitting at this table today, because that suggests that you are willing to survive beyond your circumstance. To your question, I have witnessed personally police departments' response to victims as though they're the criminal. Well, what did you do? What was in the car? Well, I want to search your house. What? I'm loading my 15-year-old kid into an ambulance in hopes that they don't lose their life on the way to Harborview, and you want to ask me about a search warrant, right? It is continued victimization of a victim, right? So when you reference your story around having the trip lined up for Boston, how excited you were, right? When you reference wanting to play the game and your arm opening up, this is a reoccurrence of a traumatic event, right? And so not only are you working past what has already happened to you, but here we are continuing the hurt, right? Because there are things that you're going to lose simply based on being a victim, right? How do we create safe space for having that conversation? How do we ensure that counseling services and other things are happening for your young people in this community, right? Because I've stood by. I've been doing this work for 19 years. I've stood by and I've watched our kids get hurt and say, hey, you know what? We can get you some Oh, no, I don't need that, right? But then we turn around and we self-medicate. We smoke weed, we drink, right? Which leads to, that's impairing our judgment, right? Coupled with the fact that you're dealing with paranoia, right? The minute that you leave out of your household, man, whoa, right? Because oftentimes in our community, we don't tell the truth about who did it to us either, do we? Right? And because we choose not to tell the truth about it and we don't allow law enforcement to provide suppression for us, the possibility of rotating around and seeing the person who's victimized you is very great. So now you're running around with a pistol and they want to give you a couple of years for every bullet, right? Rather than recognizing that this is an illness. These are kids, right? And I think that you have to first be willing to remove your mindset around the criminalization of victims.
Thank you, Ms. Rupul. And as I was listening, I was hearing like a lot of words like community and young people. And for the people watching and listening who don't know, when you say my community or our community and young people, who are you referencing?
I am referencing communities of color. Mm-hmm. I'm referencing the Southeast Seattle community. I am referencing a national community of victims treated like criminals. Mm-hmm. I am referencing my own criminalization in being a victim. So yeah.
How do you guys feel, say, if you were to be profiled or if you were police being insensitive about the situation with you and your family? How do you feel about that?
I could speak for I guess on the behalf of my mom. She actually seen the whole thing go down, and she had to stand, feeling powerless. I know she shared that when she had to call the police, they were the second people, the second people she called my family, which I'm pretty sure everybody can relate to. They're not calling the police first. And, communities of color, they're usually calling a go-to family member or friend or, family. And so she called my family, and then she called the police. They came, and then they tried to question her and treat her as if she was the suspect. It was crazy. They were questioning her like she was the one involved in it, and she knew everything, and she couldn't even process everything. They were on her. It was a bad experience for her. But I know she can share it a lot more. That's just from my perspective. But yeah.
My experience with the police, in my situation, they just so they tried to say I was 18. They originally told me I got shot. When the situation went down, I didn't know I got stabbed. I didn't see, me physically, I didn't know what happened, honestly. But when they had came, cause I was on Henderson, and I walked into the community center, and then my arm was just gushing blood, and then the police came, and I was they had sat me down because they had told me I got shot. And when it was I got shot, I kind of went into not necessarily shock, but I was kind of I don't know, I just felt different. And then they were kind of rough for me, just moving me around, but I had a wound in my back, and that's when they told me I got stabbed. And then they were when my grandma came, they were just asking my grandma a bunch of questions. They took my stuff. I guess they were supposed to keep it for investigation, but me, I'm like you said, they don't know if you were really just on your way to school. I was actually on my way to football practice. I have my backpack and everything on my stuff. Mm. So it was just kind of, I didn't get none of my stuff back. I didn't they didn't really, I don't know. The police just, I had another traumatic experience with the police though. In the same, like, actually like just one block over. It was still in Henderson, but we're over by South Shore now. And the police had said, I was with a group of my friends, and the police had got a report that we were passing around a gun in front of the school. So we're all walking around, all of us in a group, and a police officer comes from behind us with a rifle. He's like, put your hands up, don't nobody move or nothing. And I'm like, you know, because I haven't had any type of gun pointed at me or anything like that. So that was kind of traumatizing, just me, like, my life is like, and when you guys saying like, if when you guys got anything or if you guys run or anything, I was just like, but coming to find out, like, nobody had anything. They just got like a false report. And then,
If you got a report.
because all of us were young brown and black men. Like, none of us were white kids. But I feel like if it was a group of white kids, like, that would never even, that whole suspicion would have never even happened. But I also had another experience with the police. It was my first time ever getting pulled over, and I wasn't even driving. I was parked outside of my house, and one of my former teammates had got shot. He got killed outside his house, and I didn't know that he had died like when he had, like, until I went inside the house. But the police had came outside my house. They pulled up on the car that I was parked in outside my house and said that we were. There was a dark sedan that left the area, and now you're just sitting here and like basically try to say we fit the description of a murder pretty much. And that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, just like being outside my house and that being the case, because I feel like if I was a white man parked outside, they would have been like, have you seen anything or anybody come around this way or anything of the sort, versus just trying to pin a murder on you. Like, and I didn't have my license at the time. No form of identification. I mean, like, they could have did anything, but I had to call somebody outside whose vehicle it was and all that. Like, I had to go through a bunch of stuff just because the police just want to be like racist. Really, I mean, that's the word. I mean, they just feel so like threatened or like scared by black and brown people, like colored people.
I think that's arguable. Right. If you want to be able to victimize someone without question, criminalize them. Right?
Right.
I'm challenged and triggered because I know a great deal of the response that we receive from law enforcement has to do with assumptions around violence, even though statistics point in the opposite direction. Right? You reference being handled. Didn't feel like you were being cared for when you were stabbed, right? And I recently read an article that shared about African-American women's mortality when we give birth to our children, right? And so if we're overrepresented in numbers of people who lose their lives trying to give birth to their children, doesn't that suggest that our medical system probably isn't necessarily taking the same level of care for us as they do for other people, right? And so... yeah, I'm challenged with that, right? I'm also challenged with the concept of asking a million questions and, oh, well, you know, you're a criminal, you're wrong, you're this, you're that, right? A lot of assumptions are made about folks, particularly folks that are in communities of color, because they can, right? When we talk about a Eurocentric system that was built not with us in mind, right? The idea that if they did it to Billy, there's going to be 6 or 7 people. They're going to file a lawsuit. There's going to be loose coverage, blah, blah, blah. We know we've buried people in our community, and it doesn't so much as flash across the screen, right? There's a different system and level of accountability when you're dealing with a person who is not of color, unfortunately, right? And so I'm triggered around that. And then to your point, Miracle, just around being questioned and the treatment that your mother encountered. I unfortunately have witnessed some of that. And I question where it comes from, right? You can work in this community. I've been I've been doing it for 20 years. You can work in the community. You can give your life to young people and the forward progression of other folks and still be treated in that way. It's a sickness.
Being there in one of the situations, I kind of thought it was weird because when I came outside to my car and I saw the police, like, they were on both corners, and I was like, I called Franco. I was like, why are the police outside? And I was just like really confused, and so I like followed, like I just walked a little more because the police were like talking. They're like locked them in basically, and I didn't know it was like for them in the car, and you know, it's a car of like Black men. And when I finally walked over when they were like questioning them and just pinning like the case on them, basically trying to basically say they were the ones that shot him or were there. I didn't understand. And so I like asked, I was like, what, why are you guys here? And they're like, why are you here? And I was like, this is my car. And then all of a sudden they just stopped asking them questions. I was like, do you need anything from me? Do you need the car registration? Do you need my license? I was like, why do you need theirs? I was like, this is my car. They're like, oh, nothing, never mind. And then they just left and they stopped asking them questions. But if I didn't even show up, they could have just took them in just because they wanted to and do whatever.
They could have shot him.
Yeah.
Right? And you think about situations like Charlene Lyles, where she was documented having had some mental health issues. She called the police and was subsequently murdered. Right? If we know as a community of color, we have the Breonna Taylors who are in their bed sleep. If you know, if you put your hands up and you comply and you follow instructions and you're not a bad person and you work in the community, and that doesn't change anything, unfortunately. Because there are people who have called for help. There are people who were sleeping. And so there's already a level of distrust. And then when you come in, you're not coming in with an attitude of repair. You're coming in with the attitude of trying to criminalize someone. To hear you reference, you never got your backpack back. Dang, he probably needed his football pads. That breaks my heart. A kid. For evidence? Right? I'm sick. How do we work past this?
I don't know, building on to that point and talking more about like our relationship with the police department, just in general, I feel like one way, I'm not going to say we can fix it, but one way, and not even ensure, but to mark some type of progression is like if we actually see ourselves like represented in the police department. And that doesn't mean, like for me, that doesn't mean like a Black officer in the West Seattle or East Seattle precinct, but that means like somebody that's actually from the CD, grew up in the CD, somebody that's actually from West Seattle, grew up in West Seattle, and are familiar with the community. Because one thing, I mean, with my interaction, it's like my interaction with the police have become numb. So not to say that like I'm not afraid, but it's like whenever I get pulled over, whenever I get questioned, whenever they run into me on the sidewalk, it's like it's just like something regular. So I'm not up in arms about anything. And it's weird because it's like I'll go to like High Point Community Center, for example, right in West Seattle. They used to have late night closed down because not enough kids were going. But it's like this was a late night I was going to every Friday. If I wasn't at High Point, I was at Southwest. If I wasn't at Southwest, I was at Rainier Beach. And so like this is somewhere I'm going every Friday. So for the most part, the same 20 people that were there already knew like who I was. The people working there knew who I was, and then even the security guard sometimes knew who I was depending on who was working that night. And then so for me and my friends to get questioned and we're being pulled over, not even pulled over, but we're being stopped walking because they're investigating a drive-by shooting that happened in West Seattle. It's like, one, it's like it didn't even happen over here in High Point. Mm-hmm. Two, we're on foot. Like, so a drive-by shooting and we're walking on foot, that doesn't make sense.
Interesting.
And then you see that I have my basketball, but you're asking me why am I going to High Point Community Center when there's a late night that happens here every Friday and Saturday. Mm-hmm. was just weird to me. And another thing too is like even like with the West Seattle police officers and East Seattle and even the ones, you know, in Renton where I spend a lot of time, it's like I can't name a single officer off the top of my head. Which is weird because it's like you see them all the time. It's like
negative interaction. There is no relationship building that is happening. And it would be interesting to look into the correlation between the community center being closed and gentrification and its effects, right? Because when you have an increased police presence and pushing folks around, asking them questions, constantly, where are you going? What are you doing? I'm investigating this. After a while, for self-preservation, you'll stop walking that block, right? That's the intention.
And then so I was just looking at like our youth speaks and I was listening to you guys talking. And so we have like one last question from our youth speak segment, which is from D from the Central District, yes or way, you know. His question is PTSD really a bad thing?
Repeat the question.
The question is PTSD really a bad thing? It's pretty open-ended in.
Who?
Right, yeah.
Is it really a bad thing? Okay. All right. So in one regard, you know, you fall, you scrape your knee. It's good that you have a knee. It's still unfortunate that it is scraped, right? To me, the most dangerous thing that we can do is remove the offense, right? When I think about PTSD and I think about trauma and its effects, to ignore it is not dealing with it, right? Because anything covered up cannot heal. You have to be willing to face whatever the issue is. And a big part of that is being able to admit that what happened to you was a bad thing, right? Because in our community, we're taught, oh, no, it's good. I'm good, bro. Right? Oh man, I'm not tripping. I'm about to smoke. Whoop, whoop. When I cross the sucker, it's gonna be a problem. You know what I mean? We always have a quick response and a way that we're gonna remedy it for ourselves. And it's not a big issue, is it? We're quick to minimize our trauma because we question our value and our relevance. It's a relevant issue. It has great value to speak about it because our entire community is affected by it. It is a sickness that interferes with it. It even, there is research that supports it. Anytime you are faced with a traumatic situation, it affects your brain's connections. This goes beyond, oh, something bad happened to me. Oh, I need counseling, blah, 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 blah. No. It literally alters your ability to think well. And so no matter what, you begin at a disadvantage in an environment where you're already beginning at a disadvantage, right? It's challenging for me to hear that the best way that we resolve the issue is to ignore that there is an issue at all. Because there is, right? Coming out of a grocery store in full-blown panic and the entire space is rotating around you and you know you haven't moved your feet is an issue, right? And we must first unpack that to be able to get to healing.
I agree. I don't know, like for me, like for example, so when I started going to high school, Overlake High School, for those who don't know, it's like a private school out east in Redmond. And that's obviously not where I grew up. But like, so when I started going there, you know, they have this thing where like everybody just leaves their backpacks in around. And this is just a basic example and analogy. And I'm like, why is everybody like leaving their backpack like wherever? Because I mean, like in the environment I was coming from, you leave your backpack like it's being ran through. So you're missing your binder. Like people steal anything, even notebook paper. So it's like, I'm not going to, no, for real though. Like I'm not finna like
big
leave.
pencils.
For real.
They
no.
Don't let it be a mechanical pencil. Come on,
No,
man.
for real. So I'm not finna leave my backpack, but then it's like once I engage in those conversations with like a lot of these white students that go to the school, they're like, oh, nobody's finna steal this, nobody's finna steal that, nobody, and then it just never happens. And so there's that like sense of like trust within their community, but then I always ask myself like, why can't we have that? You know, like what happened? Like obviously I know like to a certain extent what happened, but like what happened and like what's preventing us from establishing that trust within our own community?
So to that point, right? And it's a great point. And it brings me back to the young man's question, is it a good thing? You are not blindly unaware of the concept of leaving your backpack somewhere. So other people who go to your school may go downtown to a bus stop and set their backpack down. You would never, right? And so, yes, there is a level of awareness and there is a benefit to having that level of awareness. However, because we know that in our community, you know, primarily people of African American descent, our crimes are almost always tied to economics. We own 0.1% of the wealth in the United States. Right. And so after you work for someone else's financial gain for 400 years, and then government systems are put in place to assist Caucasians with purchasing homes, literally, right? Post this, and we have no access financially, because in order for you to be able to own, you must first be naturalized. And naturalization for our citizens didn't happen until like well into the 60s. Scary. That concept is scary. It's terrifying to me that my parents and their parents' parents may very well work every single day and never be able to legitimately own their property because of the laws that we have on the books. And so we are literally in a place wherein our laws have to be changed. Legislation needs to happen. There has to be a sharing of the wealth at this point, right? That's that whole concept of 40 acres and a mule. Well, how do we translate that? Because until we are in a better financial situation, we will always, let me give you an example. I'm the mother of 2, right? But I got like 230 kids in my program, probably about 1,500 that I done ran across in this city, whom I love, who I will go to war with, whom I will go to war for 110% of the time. War with around what you need to do, right? There is nothing I will not do for my children. My existence, my every breath is built on the concept that my children are the most important thing to me in my life. There is nothing like the desperation of not being able to feed your child. And if you tell me that you can go to work and go to college and graduate and get a job and get laid off and not be able to access unemployment for whatever reason, or not be able to get rehired and not be able to feed your kids, you gonna tell me that somebody walked past you with a 24-karat gold chain, you ain't gonna take it from them? You will. We are forced into, right, situations where, again, don't let it be a mechanical pencil. That was my statement. Didn't get those. Right? If you come across souls, man, I'll be willing to compromise a friendship over a $2 mechanical pencil. And that's real life, right?
Yeah.
And so to say, oh, well, you know, we're going to get them into, and I've always been a cheerleader for this, we're going to get somebody into a 6-month program where they can make a couple of dollars and then that's it. How are we creating and sustaining access to viable employment? How are we putting people in a situation where they do not have to take somebody else's backpack?
Thank you. So based off Dee's question and then your very well thought out and presented response, I'm hearing like a recurring theme of like internalized like PTSD and trauma. So something that doesn't directly happen to us individually, but it's something that happens to us like as a community, and it forces us to develop like these habits. So what I want to do is just like go around the table and kind of ask like, what are 2 or 3, like maybe just one, but 2 or 3 habits you feel like not only your family or yourself have developed because of internalized PTSD and trauma, but then also like what you see in the community as well. And if you need to give me an example, I can start.
I'll start. So a habit that I've pretty much like got from from like my experience was like pretty much like making sure nobody's behind you when you're going home. Like I will wrap around the block 200,000 times. I'll lose them before I go to my house where I sleep. So like I've learned how to do that, and also I'm super good at driving and like making sure I'm just like looking out for anyone. Like I don't like when people drive slow next to me, so I'm losing you too. And like I just, especially if I don't have nothing, no protection, but learned that. Also just it's been kind of made aware, like once you get of age to get a license to have a gun on you, then you need to do that ASAP, just pretty much for protection and paranoia, just being cautious, and you have to do what you got to do. That's pretty much what, I've learned.
Yeah. I've heard like just the people that I've been around and the stuff they've been through. Like I was never worried about. I was like, who cares? They're not worried about me. I was like, if they're following me, they're like, but you don't understand. Like if you're with me, or like or some people, if I'm around Black people, or they're like, well, the police is right there. I was like, they're not worried about me, but I was like, but they tell me, because I didn't understand that. I was like, why are they so worried about you? Like at a point in my life. And then I like finally understood that, and like the things they had to go through. Because, I'm a minority too, but I'm a model minority. They don't look at me the same way they would look at you, And I don't know. So I just like, people teach me that are around me. They like tell me like, just being around here, you got to watch who is behind you, or like, even from just getting tints on your car or something, like they're like, you never know, like anything could happen. And I just like learn from what other people tell me, and I believe that because people have been through things. So yeah, just being cautious and aware.
For me, like one of the main ones was really just like watching every car, like if I'm outside and I'm like, if there's a car driving past, like I'm looking inside of it, like that's just like, or just like always looking over my shoulder, cause like my incident, somebody like came behind me, like I was unaware, so just being like alert at all times, and then like. In my neighborhood, you always hear the sirens like every night, pretty much like every night. But like when my incident first happened, I see like an ambulance, and I feel some type of way, because I remember like when being in the back of an ambulance, and I was just like, but like as I got older, and it just kept going on, like it was just like another thing, another day. You just hear them every night, like it was just something. It was just like the norm. And then. Just like, I feel like I was always like, I never really talked much, but just like, it kind of like made me be more distant towards like everybody, like a distant approach.
For me, I would say I have always been what police would categorize as gang affiliated, right? And so that impacts your responses to the universe already. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say that I would call them habits at this point. They belong to me. They are part of my makeup, right? I have developed, however, coping mechanisms, right, for these types of situations that look like the understanding that you can literally talk yourself out of a belief system. No, you're okay, right? Mm-hmm. You're good. Even though you're walking to the car in the dark because you messed around and left your purse on the seat and you don't want nobody to break the window. You got to get out there, right? Yeah. Power through it. So I would say that. I would say prayer. Prayer has definitely been eye-opening for me in understanding that you'll never be able to cheat death. You're never going to be able to cheat something that is supposed to happen to you. But it helps me to make the decision that is very simply, it is not in your control. And it helps me not to panic so much about things. And then the last thing is, I'm usually busy protecting somebody else. It helps me not to focus so much on my own safety.
Thank you. For me, I don't know, one thing my parents and my nana especially always taught me was like never leave the house like without tennis shoes on. Like, if you catch me, like, I don't care how hot it is outside, you'll never catch me in slides, sandals. Because if I'm in a situation I have to run, it's like, I'm not going. I mean, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm not going to get very far running in like slides or nothing.
Right.
Another thing my dad taught me, like, I need to start practicing this more, but like whenever I pull up somewhere and I'm driving, I need to back in to my parking space. So that just in case I need to drive off.
Back it.
Yeah, so just in case I drive off or I need to drive off, I can like get out of there. Then another thing that I often see in our community, and I'm not even from the South End, but it's pretty cool. Like when I first heard about this, like be safe, bro. Like, cause I didn't realize until I started going to Overlake where it's like in our community, it's like we really say like be safe or stay safe or let me know when you get X, Y, and Z. And so often, cause it's like I'll be in my community and that was just a normal thing for me growing up. And then I'll go over to Redmond, and even with like some of the black families I met over there, it's like they don't say like be safe or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, to me, it just seemed like really weird, like how you guys like don't say that. But then it's like, now I understand why we say like be safe now that I'm older and everything.
Yeah.
It's a necessary statement in our community, unfortunately.
Yep. Like going off what you said, yeah. I was never worried about like backing in. Whenever I'm with people though, they're always like, why don't you back in? I'm like, what do you need to back in for? Like, people be putting me on game, like letting me know. But I'm just like, okay. I was like, and I understand it. Like it's a lot more deeper than just, wanting to back in. Right. So it's easier to get out or something. And also going off what you said you hear like sirens every night. Like when I lived out here, every single night, it's just like what I'm used to, hearing. I was like, okay, it's always gonna happen around this time. I'm just gonna hear it every night. When I moved to a predominantly white area, I heard no sirens, like ever. Like I was sleeping, I was like, why don't I ever hear nobody come at night? And so saying that, like, do you guys think PTSD is more prevalent in certain communities and like it happens more in like different areas? Because hearing sirens every night, just in like one neighborhood that's more like diverse in color compared to a white neighborhood. Like, what do you guys think about all that? Sorry, long question.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, right? Because law enforcement's response is typically suppression, right? Growing up in the Canyon Ridge Estates in Bothell, Officer Friendly comes to your school. He passes out candy. He passes out stickers. He introduces himself, and he has an established relationship within the community. We have school emphasis officers who are slamming kids on the ground, who are paid to create positive relationship, and they're criminalizing our elementary school kids. Right? They're eliminating some of these systems on purpose, and they need to be, right? And I also think that, again, just around desperation and the challenges around economics, we're almost forced into situations where we are then victimizing other people.
Yeah, I would say yeah. Coming from cause like I've been to like other neighborhoods and like I just seen how people interact with each other. But like in certain neighborhoods, just a gunshot every day or every other day is a normal. Just hearing it, so I don't know. Like, so to answer that question, yeah.
All right, just to like end off our episode, can we like just name like whether you feel like you've gained resilience like post your traumatic experience, like you've overcame it, Yes, for me. That's simple.
Yes for me too. Like, yeah.
I would say no. And I would say no because it's being able to live past it, right? It's the difference between living and surviving. And it is my considered opinion that communities of color are surviving. We are not thriving. We are not living. We just learn to deal with it and how to respond to it.
That's real.
So for me to answer the question, I think no. Just adding on to Mr. Cole's part. All right, so that will wrap it up for today. Thank you again for tuning in to the Youth Insider Podcast, episode 2, sponsored by the Southeast Network. Be safe.
Be safe, bro.
Be safe.
And Sudi, where can they find this?
SRV Youth Insider on Instagram. And I just want to say thank you, everybody, for sharing and being vulnerable enough. I'm sure your guys' stories will help people, for sure. And thank you for being here, Mr. Cole.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having me.
guys.
So we're out.
We're out.
You guys did so good.